I didn't mean to make a statement. I just got tired of feeling like a character I no longer believed in. For over 20 years, I had the same routine. That little plastic bottle, the gloves, the smell I pretended didn't bother me. Dark brown, cool undertones, safe. I told myself it was about maintenance, not denial. But it became something else, a way to stay invisible in the right kind of way. At first, it helped. I looked like myself, or at least the version of myself I thought the world wanted to see. Sharp, polished, appropriate. But the mirror started to argue with me. Not all at once, just little things. The way the color looked flat in sunlight, or how the texture started to feel brittle, no matter what mask I used. It wasn't just about roots. It was about permission, the kind I didn't know I was still waiting for. I didn't wake up one morning and throw out the dye. The shift was quieter than that. A pause, a hesitation, and then a moment, unplanned, unglamorous, that made me stop covering and start looking. What followed wasn't easy. I doubted myself more than once, but I also started seeing someone I hadn't recognized in a long time. And it began with a color I used to fear: gray. Every 6 weeks, like clockwork, I'd book the appointment, slip on the cape, and wait for the first swipe of that familiar cold dye across my scalp. Dark brown, just a touch cooler than my natural shade. It always felt like maintenance, not vanity. Like trimming the hedges or getting the oil changed. I told myself it made me look polished, sharp, like someone who still had places to go and people to impress. In a way, that color became part of my uniform, professional, composed, put together. It was armor I never questioned because it never failed me. Until it did. It started quietly. The way the roots didn't just grow in, they glared back at me. A few silvery strands around my temples that no longer felt like whispers, but warnings. And it wasn't just the color. My texture changed, drier than before. The dye stopped blending smoothly. Some weeks, even right after touching up, I looked in the mirror and felt hollow. Not unattractive, just disconnected. Like the woman looking back at me was rehearsing a role she no longer wanted. That dark brown used to feel like a power suit. Now it felt like stage makeup I forgot to wash off. I remember a photo someone took at brunch. The light caught my part, and even though the color was fresh, the whole thing looked flat, overdone. There was no softness in my face, no ease. I stared at it later, alone, and thought, if I passed her on the street, I wouldn't even notice her. I used to want that. Now it stung. It wasn't some dramatic epiphany, just a slow realization that I was painting over something that might have been truer than I wanted to admit. That dye wasn't just covering gray. It was covering a quieter voice in me that had been asking for softness, for realness, for something less controlled. I couldn't say exactly what was wrong. I just knew something had stopped feeling like me. It's just that gray can be harsh. They say it adds 10 years, you know? Of course you can go natural. Just don't let yourself go. None of them meant harm. They were my friends, women I'd shared wine with, secrets with, careers with. We'd sat in the same chairs at the same salons for decades, flipping through magazines, rolling our eyes at celebrity trends, laughing about chin hairs and bifocals. So when they spoke, I listened, and quietly, I obeyed. I kept booking the touch-ups. I'd push appointments even earlier if a big event was coming. I stuck to cuts that didn't raise eyebrows. Not too short, not too bold, not too trying. Once I brought in a photo of Helen Mirren with a silver pixie, and my stylist raised one brow and said, "Cute, not really your vibe, right?" I nodded like I agreed, but I didn't know what my vibe even was anymore, because after a while, all that support started sounding like a warning. Stay safe, stay likable, stay invisible. No one said it outright, but the message was clear. Gray hair might be natural, but it's not neutral. It signals something. And we'd all spent years learning how to mute those signals. I didn't hate the mirror, but I started to resent how carefully I curated what it showed. Everything about my look was chosen to make others comfortable. I didn't dress for drama, didn't wear bold lips, didn't even try red frames like I used to love. It was like I was playing a supporting role in my own life. Tasteful, polished, quietly present. There was a dinner party. Nothing fancy, just a Tuesday night with 3 couples we'd known for years. One of the women, freshly highlighted, looked at me mid-conversation and said, "Don't even think about going gray. You're too elegant to give up like that." I laughed along, the way we do. But later in the car, I caught my reflection in the window and whispered, "What if it's not giving up?" I wasn't ready to change. I didn't even have a plan. But for the first time, I'd said something, even if it was just to myself, that didn't echo back what I've always heard. It wasn't rebellion I wanted, just permission to stop performing. It wasn't brave, it was just overdue. One morning, without drama or defiance, I looked at the box dye in my bathroom drawer and thought, not today. I didn't throw it out. I didn't announce anything. I just didn't reach for it. And that tiny moment, that non-action, was the most radical thing I'd done in years. But don't let me romanticize it. The first week without color was a mess. Every time I passed a mirror, I flinched. The roots were maybe half an inch, but I saw them like searchlights. My fingers kept brushing my scalp as if I could smooth the gray back into hiding. I found myself avoiding eye contact, not with other people, but with myself, in store windows, in the microwave door, in the passenger side mirror of the car. It was like my face didn't know how to frame itself anymore. I thought about giving up, not once, not twice, but daily. I'd reach for the dye, hold it in my hand, and set it back down. Not because I felt strong, but because I felt tired. Tired of cycling through that same routine, hoping it would somehow fix the quiet dissatisfaction I couldn't name. The panic was real. Not dramatic, just constant. Low grade. Like background noise you can't quite shut off. I'd walk through Target and swear every woman was staring at my roots. I'd practice how to explain it if someone asked. "Oh, I'm just seeing what happens." I'm not sure I'll stick with it. I wanted an out, a caveat, something to soften the exposure. And then something strange happened. On day 5, I ran into an old neighbor at the post office. We chatted for a bit, bills, dog food, the usual. As we turned to leave, she said, "By the way, you look really rested. Did you go somewhere?" I hadn't, but something in me did. That night, I stared at my reflection under the bathroom light, harsh, unforgiving, and for the first time that week, I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either, but I looked. Really looked. And though the color change was barely visible, there was space now, around my eyes, my jaw, my breath. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But the panic had quieted. And for the first time in years, I wasn't hiding anything. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic reveal, no new me moment. Just mornings that felt less like preparation and more like returning. I started seeing softness, not in the hair itself, that was still growing out in its stubborn, patchy way, but in my face. The lines were still there, of course, but without the sharp dark color drawing the eye downward, my features looked gentler, less managed, more mine. At first, I assumed it was lighting, a trick of the bathroom mirror. But it kept happening, in store windows, in FaceTime calls, in photos I didn't pose for. I looked kinder. Not to others, necessarily. To myself. There was a strange kind of peace in letting go. No more rooting around in drawers for gloves. No more planning vacations around touch-ups. And the quiet, the mental quiet, of not trying to keep up with a version of myself I didn't believe in anymore. That might have been the real freedom. One afternoon, I bumped into an old friend I hadn't seen in years. She paused mid-hug, looked at me closely, and said, "Something's changed. You look like yourself again." I smiled and said thank you. But inside I thought, no. I look like someone I'm just now getting to know. It wasn't just the outside that shifted. I noticed I moved slower in the mornings, not because I was sluggish, but because I wasn't rushing to fix something. I opened windows more often, stood closer to natural light. I used to angle lamps and tilt my chin to minimize shadows. Now I let the sun fall where it may. There were still uncertain days. A few outfits I suddenly hated, lipsticks that clashed. But instead of blaming the gray, I started adjusting around it, like working with a painting's new palette, not erasing the canvas. The more I lived in it, the less performative it felt, and that space between who I was and who I'd been acting like started closing. I didn't feel finished, but I felt at home. I didn't need approval. I needed to stop asking for it. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine walking into a room without my roots covered. Now I walk into sunlight and don't even flinch. I used to think gray hair meant giving up on youth, on style, on visibility. But the truth is, I was giving up something much quieter when I dyed it. I was giving up the right to look like a woman who's lived, who's learned, who's still here. Now I look in the mirror and see strength where I once saw fear. Not the kind of strength that demands attention, but the kind that doesn't apologize for existing. There's clarity in the silver, like it says exactly what I've been trying to feel. I've earned this face. I've earned this ease. It's not just the hair. It's the way I move through the world now. I don't second-guess every outfit. I don't shrink in group photos. I don't wear sunglasses indoors, hoping the light will soften me. The gray didn't just change my look. It changed my posture. My granddaughter touched my hair the other day and said, "It's like soft lightning." I don't know what she meant exactly, but I haven't stopped thinking about it. That's how I want to feel. Calm and striking, all at once. And yes, some people still say you're so brave, as if aging openly is a risk. But I'm not being brave, I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to look younger anymore. I'm trying to look true. So, if you've been holding your breath, waiting for the right time, the perfect tone, the magic shade, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me sooner. Gray isn't the end of something. It's the first time I've ever looked in the mirror and thought, that woman's not trying, she's standing. This isn't just hair, it's home. This isn't the boldest look I've ever had, but it's the first one that doesn't feel like a costume. For the first time in decades, I'm not adjusting the mirror. I'm letting it show me what's real, because this was never just about color. It was about presence, about stepping into a version of myself that doesn't whisper or apologize or try to blend in. There's a quiet power in walking through the world without camouflage, and not needing anyone's permission to do it. If any part of this felt familiar, the hesitation, the hiding, the voice in your head that still sounds like someone else, just know you're not alone. We're not late. We're not behind. We're simply arriving, strand by strand. And whether you've made the leap, or you're still standing at the edge of it, I'd love to hear what you've learned. The comments here have become one of the most honest places I know. Leave a note. Share your story. You never know who might need to hear it. Because this isn't about gray. It's about showing up as ourselves, finally.